What's up, guys and gals? Welcome back to the things I learned this week. I hope everyone is doing well out there. What I wanted to discuss today specifically is the five element theory of personality. And while there's five elements, and I may touch on all of them briefly, I really only want to go into detail on the several that I think are encapsulate my personality and are applicable to me, and kind of just give examples of how um, the tendencies or the traits, physical characteristics of those elements um, apply in my daily life and manifest in my day to day. So, without further ado, let's get into it. While it's believed that by practitioners of TCM or traditional Chinese medicine that you're predominantly one element, you can have other elements too that factor into your personality or your tendencies. And I personally believe that there's two that pretty strongly um, make up my personality. One of which is the water element. Um, Often, water is deep, obviously, like a lake or a river. So, the water element is the type of person who's very deep and introspective. Someone who could be seen as just creative, has that artistic touch, and also has a really strong sense of family. If you think about water, it's always going downstream or with the current. So, in terms of personality, same rules apply where the water personality type is someone who goes with the flow. Maybe not necessarily spontaneous of their own choosing, but they're open to opportunities and new experiences. That being said, at the same time, it also goes where it needs to. So, like I mentioned, water running downstream, it knows where it needs to go. So, the water element is someone who's oftentimes strong willed, knows what needs to be done, and will see to make sure that those things are handled. When the water element is in balance and all the organs are functioning correctly, they're very courageous and they can yield profound wisdom. So often, the water element in a social setting or at a party will be the person who's pretty reserved and won't be saying a ton. And then when they do finally talk or someone asks them their opinion of something, they'll say something that others perceive as being very profound or very insightful. Maybe just have the ability to analyze things in a way that other people don't necessarily have and give them unique perspectives. So I think that's definitely characteristic of my personality. I've been told in the past that I have really good insights, not to toot my own horn or anything, but um, I definitely am the type who's reflective and think before acting or before speaking. Um, Much in that sense, like I said, the water element is someone who's very reflective, but they're also receptive, so they can pick up on things other people miss, just in terms of reading body language or um, picking up on emotions that other people have that they might be trying to cover or mask, but ultimately, someone with a keen sense of perception or perceptiveness can pick up on and see through. So, those are definitely characteristics that I have. Um, in terms of being receptive and reflective, to be energized or basically revitalize yourself as a water element, you need time in solitude to reflect. You need downtime away from people, and you, even better, when you can have that downtime and you don't think that there's anything pulling on you, like water pulling you in all sorts of directions or whatever. Um, you need to have downtime where there's not an obligation that's eating away at you or in the back of your mind or just prior commitments. in order to basically recharge and revitalize yourself. So, that being said, when you do have that imbalance and you think that there's these expectations that you know that you need to meet or obligations to someone else that you have, that can create an imbalance. Basically, the emotion that's associated with the water element is fear, and oftentimes it manifests in terms of the fear of disappointing others, or the fear of opinions of others. So that kind of gets back to having time where you don't have obligations or things in the back of your mind that are creating anxiety or um, you know obligations that you need to fulfill for other people. And when you do have those things, like I said, the basically when you're fearful of that or your imbalance has been created because of that, it can result in bladder and kidney deficiencies. Those are the two organs that are associated with the water element. And those actually are tied to the adrenal glands. The adrenals are right on the top of your kidneys. And the adrenal glands are what's responsible for the fight or flight response or the secretion of adrenaline. So when there's an imbalance in the water element and you don't have time to recharge and reflect and just time in solitude, I guess, to kind of um, recharge or just refuel, um, that's when the imbalance is created, and it can result in beyond fear. Ultimately, it can turn into things like hormonal issues, reproductive issues, and even hypothyroidism. So, decreased functioning of your thyroid gland and thyroid system. So, when that does get to an extreme like that, it can manifest physically in terms of edema, so swelling, just water retention. Like if you think about it, um, the water element obviously needs the bladder and the kidneys to be functioning in order to process the water and flush out your system. And when that's not happening, that's when water retention can occur and all sorts of swelling can occur in various parts of your body, like for example, your eyes, puffiness around your eyes, dark circles, and when you are imbalanced too as a water element, it can result in even more become you can become even more easily fatigued from social interactions than you are even when you're imbalanced, even though that's just typical for a water element to um, be overwhelmed or become exhausted with continuous or prolonged social interactions. So, I know personally for me, after working 8 hours, I can't go from all the social interaction or stimulation that I have at work, go to somewhere else, like another social setting, especially if it's something that I think is an obligation and it's just not my own free choosing. I'm going to be come off as maybe just on edge or short tempered if I don't have that time to reflect and recharge. I started working a job picking items for online shoppers at the grocery store, and even though you're not asked a ton to interact with customers, that's not really part of the job requirements. You just don't have any time to downtime at all. No time to reflect or take mental inventory. You're constantly go on the go and looking for the next item or where you need to be to find the next item for your list. And even like a 4 or 5 hour shift after that, I just feel fatigued because, like I said, you don't have any time for mental inventory. So that job became extremely exhausting for me. Um, it's kind of just, you feel like it's like a whirlwind and you are basically don't have any control of the situation. So I think that had a lot to do with ultimately resulting in a little bit of depression and other things too, because my prior job, it was the kind of the opposite. Even though I was doing tasks and um, consistently for like the entire amount of my shift, it was actual work for the entire shift, and there was hardly any downtime. I could listen to music and I could think about other things, even though I was focusing a lot of my attention on the task. It was to some degree mindful, um, or mindless activities or mindless tasks. And as a water element, and especially in this new job, I'm realizing that that's something that I need for sure too. Um, Another thing too was that I was living at my parents' house this winter while they were in Florida, and I was finally falling into a routine and kind of um, just really starting to formulate a good schedule. And then they came back home, and that just shook everything up, basically. Beyond just being unable to utilize the spaces that I needed to for the routine that I developed, there was always just like constant unexpected distractions. Um, just little things, like background noises, or just um, my parents asking me questions about little things when I was extremely focused or concentrated at the time. A lot of the activities that I do are things that really require a ton of attention and focus. Like, for example, DJing, you have to be present. You always are thinking about getting the next track ready, making sure everything is in sync, working on the transition. Um, it's not something that your attention can be pulled away from for extended period of time. Same thing with like Tai Chi or Kung Fu practices. You want to always be focused and concentrating on the breath, and um, think about your internal world. And when people are asking you questions constantly, then it's very distracting, and um, all that noise prevents you just from being present and staying focused. So that I've come to appreciate more and more, especially after having that period of almost entire solitude. I've really come to appreciate how golden silence really is as a water element specifically. Another thing too, just when my parents came home, in terms of staying focused, it was just there was excessive clutter and noise everywhere. Like I said, um, kind of, it was difficult even while my parents were gone, because basically, um, my mom has a tendency to cling to the past, or just appreciate the past, and is very nostalgic, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but ultimately it manifests just in clutter and holding on to things because of emotional attachment or nostalgia, and it can really serve to be distracting and prevent you from being in the present and looking to the future. Um, the metal element is actually the one that's associated with the inability to let go of past emotions, or um, just basically clinging to the past. And I don't see myself as a metal element, because there's a lot of the other characteristics that I really don't think that I am. Like, for example, the metal element is someone who's structured, productive, and really good at putting systems in place. And like I said, it takes me a long time to actually finally work out a system and a schedule and get a routine going. Um, so I don't think that I necessarily am that, but I definitely had an inability to be present, or let go of my past. I think, especially now, because of the situation that we're all in and times seem dire a lot, at least to me. Um, I think it's a lot easier to just live in the past and try to think of or focus on when things seemingly were easier, but that's not beneficial, you know? And I think also that it's just more where that tendency comes from for me is more just from where we are right now in society, not necessarily from being something that's genetic in my personality type. Because, like I said, I don't really see myself aligning with a lot of the other qualities that are characteristic of a metal element. And same thing with my mom, too. It's the metal element's thought to be the strong silent type and someone who doesn't want attention but is dependable and will see things through, but they shy away from the limelight. And my mom isn't like that at all. She's more, if anything, like a fire element, which the fire element is maybe not necessarily the life of the party, but just someone who likes to um, be the center of attention and convey their thoughts and emotions, make sure that their opinions are heard and that um, they're putting themselves out there basically. So, and I'm completely, like I said, I'm not like that at all. That's almost the opposite of the water element. If you think about it, obviously water and fire are basically opposites. So, I don't think either one of us are necessarily metal elements, but I think that tendency for me um, to right now especially look to the past is more characteristic or indicative of just the situation that we're all in right now. I had thought also that when I left my job to move to Mexico in June of 2019, I knew that the person who replaced me was going to be leaving about a year later. So I kind of always had in the back of my mind that I was going to have the opportunity to get that job back when he left because of how dedicated I was to the position and the company, and um, my tendency to go above and beyond and bring in just new disciplines or learn new disciplines that they didn't have and they didn't have period at my company before I was there. So I always thought in the back of my head that I would be able to kind of fall back into my position. They would come proactively and ask me to return, which didn't end up happening. And I think once I realized or it became apparent that that wasn't going to be the case and I wasn't going to just be able to slip back in there like nothing happened, I think that's really when I started thinking more about all the past experiences that I had and how really tailored to me that situation that I had was, beyond just the job, my living situation. I was living in Chicago. The neighborhood that I lived in was phenomenal, and the place that I lived specifically just basically checked all the boxes for what I wanted in the criteria, my commute to work, everything. Um, all the people I engaged with and everything. I really was in a good place, and I didn't realize that till after the fact. And once it became apparent that I wasn't going to get back to that, that's when I think I really started to um, become depressed, I would say, because of how good I had it, you know. But the more I reflect on it and I think about it too, you know, I feel like that was just a time and a place that now things are way different. And even if I was still living where I lived and working where I worked, I don't think the situation or all of the circumstances or the criteria surrounding that situation would be the same just based on how many changes there have been since that time. And once I kind of had that insight, it gave me more peace of mind and kind of put me at ease. And I was able to see better. You know, it's just, I need to appreciate that time that I have and take away from it what I need to take away, you know, just that, um, all the things I learned, and just be appreciative, and know or remember what those things were that benefited my well-being, and just make sure that I can bring those aspects into any situation, new situation that I find myself in.